this was encoded pretty damn well, and I wanted to just talk about really the 4K version of this. I wish I could show you in 4K, and this is kind of a pipe dream of mine, which is that I haven't even started hitting record. Well, at least I noticed about, a minute into filming this video that I wasn't recording. Let's start that again. Hello, and welcome to another Blu-ray Impressions video. I want to have a discussion today about this release from Eureka, which is China O'Brien 1 and 2 on 4K UHD. This set features both films from 1990 starring Cynthia Rothrock. I've talked about it before, and I will talk about it again in an in-depth video going into my thoughts on both films, reviewing the films, and also talking about all the extras, of which there are many and in great length. I think I counted about 2.5 hours worth of video extras on this disc. And then there's the commentaries, which total around, I guess it would be 4.5 hours. So there's a lot to go through and a lot to talk about. So I'm really excited about that. But for now, I just wanted to kind of hone in on really just how great it is to have releases like this now, in an era where it feels like for the past 10 years we've been getting the physical media is dying and streaming is taking over. And yeah, I feel like it's a kind of a golden age for physical media. I think that home video, in a sense, has almost never been better because, all the big heavy hitting classics for the most part are pretty much sewn up now. They're out there, they're available. There's a few kind of exceptions to the rule, of course, but what's left is more obscure stuff, and obscure doesn't necessarily mean bad. So there's lots of interesting things that can still be released and given this kind of gold standard treatment. And this is going to sound weird, but I really am so overjoyed that this release happened because and I was talking about before I realized I wasn't filming with the camera hadn't been rolling. So this is on, or both films in this set in this release are on one 4K disc, but it's a 100 gigabyte disc. So there's a lot packed onto the single. Even when I got this in, I thought, oh, it's just on one disc. I was expecting two, and there is a Vinegar Syndrome release coming out with both of these films on two separate 4K discs, but those will be 66 gigabyte discs. So really, there's not a whole lot in terms of argument's sake of, well, the Vinegar Syndrome one's going to be better because it's across two different discs. The encoding on this one, and that's a real interesting thing that a lot of people maybe might not be aware of, is that encoding is really the most important part when it comes to a transfer on Blu-ray or 4K, UHD, is that. And that's one of the most, the 4K format, which is really what I want to talk about in this video, has been such an up and down ride for me personally. I think one of my favorites is Total Recall, which is a film I absolutely love. And that transfer, that 4K restoration on Total Recall is amazing. But the encoding on the UK 4K disc is botched. So there's a couple of moments in the film where the bitrate, it runs down so low that it gets pixelated as if you're watching like a downloaded copy of a film, and it's so disheartening. And it's all in the encode. The encoding is like such a vital part of how these films look when they're put on the disc, when they're authored and mastered and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not the most technically minded of people, but the bitrate and the managing of the bitrate and how that's encoded and packaged is super important. And I have to say that these two films looked absolutely stunning. And that's, again, it's going to sound weird. These aren't great films. They're not. And that is what I love about this release. That is what I absolutely love about Eureka's 4K release of China O'Brien. And this image actually on the booklet kind of sums up a lot of why I loved the experience of watching these two films in 4K. It's the double denim. It's the double denim look. I was transported in time with these two films back to an era that I long for. I've been greatly intrigued by this. Is going to be a very tangent heavy video, but I've been intrigued by these videos on Instagram. There's a reverse sleeve there of China O'Brien too. It's pretty cool, very retro. That to me screams like VHS cover. That design, the white and the red. That it's just so 90s VHS to me. What was I saying? Yeah, I've been intrigued by these Instagram posts where it's like, you know, a sunny afternoon in the 2000s, and it's just this like whimsical piece of instrumental music, and it's just like images of like, golden hour kind of afternoons on suburban streets, and people are talking about, how better things were in the 2000s or in the 90s or in the 80s, and I feel like a lot of people pine more for being a child than they do the specific time period. But regardless, the time period in which you grew up is going to just inherently be special to you, unless you had a really bad childhood or there's other issues involved. And for me, I mean, these films were probably shot in 1989, but they both came out in 1990, and there is just this feel of the 90s to it. I mean, it's the very, very, very tail end of the 80s, obviously, but it's the hairstyles. It's on the front cover as well of the original poster there with Cynthia Rothrock as China O'Brien. Again, it's the double denim look. There's a lot of double denim in China O'Brien 1 and 2, and I love it for that. It just has a feel to it, and it's these shot in America. It's like on location, and the 4K really just brings out the color of the blue skies, and just her blonde hair. It evokes a feeling to me, this solid physical feeling of the 1990s. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and there's just something about the texture of it. And it is a texture because you're getting all this grain. And I did have Blu-ray copies of this, just the kind of screener disc, so I could compare the difference in quality of the transfer from the 1080p Blu-ray release. This is a 2-disc release on Blu-ray, 1 disc on 4K. And so I checked both films and went kind of to different scenes and matched them up with my 4K and my PS5 that I used to play Blu-rays. And the transfer is great on the Blu-ray, like it looks fantastic. But if you get it close to the screen, which you're not really supposed to do because no one watches a film closer to the screen, but if you do, for just out of argument's sake, the closer I got to the screen with the Blu-ray, things get a little pixelated here and there. And then the closer you get on the 4K, it's there. Just all that grain and detail is there, and it just. And again, like I said, the 4K experience for me has been so up and down because you can't just buy a 4K release and expect you're going to get a transfer as great as you get on this release. Is it really a 4K transfer? Is it just a 2K digital master, a digital intermediate that has been blown up to 4K and upscaled, and the only real difference you're getting is the HDR, and whatever the upgrade on the nits is. I'll never understand the obsession with nits, and I don't mean scratching the head nits. I mean there's a physical, it's a digital. It's the opposite of a physical. It's the digital term for I guess the power of the light, the quality of the light, or it wouldn't be the quality, it would be the brightness. I think that's kind of the crux of the nits. But that doesn't concern me too much. But the added resolution and the greater texture, it just and that's the thing. These films were I think that they were screened in Hong Kong. It's Golden Harvest behind these films, but I think in America and the UK these were like straight to video. Like again, I just love the idea that like straight to video movies essentially are getting the 4K treatment. Like how wild is that? And again, these aren't great films. I really enjoyed them. I think Cynthia's great. I really just enjoy the simple kind of good versus evil stories in these films. I preferred the first film to the second, but the second probably has the best fight sequences towards the end. Even the fight scenes aren't like jaw-dropping amazing, but I thought they were really cool and really fun. And there's like wrestling moves thrown in there, which I appreciated. And I, I'm not going to get into it too much. I want to really get into all of my thoughts on the films in my full review of this. And again, I wish I could show you the quality of the 4K transfer because I don't have the tech to rip 4K discs at the moment. So it's kind of a pipe dream of mine to film a video, because my camera I can film in 4K. I've never done it ever in the 2 years I've had this new camera. But I'd love to film a review in 4K and to show you real legitimate 4K clips from the film. Can't do that as of yet. But suffice to say, just my again, this is just a discussion video more than anything, but my initial reaction to this was just like, oh man, like within the first 5 minutes, I'll leave that in for free. Within the first 5 minutes, Cynthia is like driving through like these gorgeous landscapes in America. You got this unreleased Tori Amos track playing over the top. Cynthia's brooding, like, and it, oh man, the vibe of this shit to me was fantastic. So I had a great time with both of these films, and it's that kind of disappointment in the 4K format for me, that something like China O'Brien 1 and 2 get these gorgeous transfers and they just look incredible. And then you go to a film that was a huge success, had millions and millions of dollars put into it. It was a massive production, beloved by fans around the world, and it comes out in 4K in the same year. And it just looks dreadful. Like, it absolutely looks like dog shit. And we're going to get to that in the Cameron 4K saga down the line. That's going to be a long gestating project for me, because it's a tough one to get through this. But to see and it's not just the Cameron issue with the AI upscaled 4K transfers that aren't real 4K. It's just, again, like I said, there are some modern movies that were finished in 2K. They release them on 4K anyway, just so you pay more for them, and there's a bit of HDR and stuff, but or Dolby Vision. I don't think that it, for me personally, makes much of a difference in that regard. And when it's not taking advantage of the resolution, which is surely the, really what it should be, the highest priority for a 4K release is to take advantage of the resolution of how much is filling that frame and the information within it to give you a better quality version of the film. And in theory, it really is the best and most faithful way to show you a film in your home cinema or on your TV in your living room that's as close to watching a 35mm film print. And I was recently listening to a William Friedkin interview, and he was talking about, I love the way that Friedkin used to say Blu-ray, on the Blu-ray. And he would talk about the Blu-ray, and he was saying that some of his films, as transferred to Blu-ray, looked better than they did, in the cinema because of the, and I think, who else was I listening to talking about? I think it was Lynch. David Lynch was saying how he loves digital over film, because with film, it's like no two prints are the same, and there's little bits of dust everywhere, there's scratches, and you just can't get, but with digital, and kind of, I do think starting at the base format of film, then going to digital for like a 4K Blu-ray is the best possible way, really, beyond just actually having a print and being able to project it yourself. So I think that there's pros and cons, but I understand the appeal to a filmmaker and to an audience member and as a home video enthusiast to having a kind of stable image, that isn't juddering or whatever and all that kind of thing, and that can be perfected. But it's just a shame to me when you have these big budget releases and they're just upscaled. They're not really true 4K resolution. They haven't gone to the extra effort. There's a great video about the 4K music video trend on YouTube, where a lot of famous bands, they'll go back and they'll have their music videos rescanned in 4K and remastered on YouTube. But the thing is, they don't just scan something in and then it's done, because when those music videos were originally made for TV, for television, they were mastered on video, shot on film, mastered on video. And so there isn't really, the editing was done on video, right? So what they would have to do is literally scan in the original negatives and re-edit it and match it frame by frame. And in some cases, you see there's shots that they don't have the negative for, like I think Wham's Last Christmas. Looks gorgeous, 4K, but there's a few shots that are like really ropey standard definition because they didn't have the elements for it. But anyway, that's a whole other tangent. I'm just saying that there's so much you can do with this medium, and this release is such a great example of that. And not only having both films on the disc, I don't think it sacrifices the quality whatsoever. I think both films looks fantastic and consistently throughout. There wasn't really a drop, like I said, with the Total Recall, where suddenly it looks all pixelated or anything. That's a glaring error with that disc, I think. I'm not sure if anything was ever done about that, but I think both films look great on this release, but to have the access to all these commentaries and all these video extras, and they look great too, I just think it's, and that's another thing that's a big advantage of 4K is just the space. So, almost even, I've never really thought about this or seen anyone talk about it, but there is, I guess in theory, you could have a 1080p transfer on a 4K disc that could look better than the original Blu-ray because you'd have more space to have a higher bitrate. So even if the resolution wasn't as big as 4K, you could arguably have a kind of a more robust image on the disc. But the optimal use of it, of course, is to have a 4K resolution image. I just wanted to talk about 4K for a bit and why I absolutely loved kind of diving into the 90s. I'd never really heard of these films. Well, I did hear of them once I started getting into Hong Kong cinema, and Cynthia popped up a few times in like Yes Madam and so on. And so I was like, okay, she's pretty fucking badass. I wanted, what else has she done? And China O'Brien was like the kind of starring lead vehicle movies that she made, and so with Robert Clouse directing. And so I was vaguely aware of them, but still, going in, I didn't know too much about what to expect, and it's very much this great kind of like cop versus the bad guys and revenge, and and just like a nice kind of bouncy lightness at the same time. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it just has that kind of 90s Americana feel that was the stuff I loved growing up, because that was my bread and butter with films and getting into films, was mainly American movies of the 1990s. And so this to me is kind of emblematic of that, and I'd love to see more as on a personal note, like 90s 4K releases. I have quite a few of them myself, but I'm thinking like some of those like family movies that will probably never make it, because again, this is like a very niche market where people love these martial arts movies. I don't foresee something like, say, Andre. There's like Andre, the film with the seal, or like Gold Diggers, The Secret of Bear Mountain, which I love. That'll never get a 4K release, but that has probably one of the worst Blu-ray transfers I've ever seen in my life. But it at least gives me hope that there's some kind of corners of the market where releases like this can happen, and we just get something really special. I think this is a really special release, and I hope that Eureka does more of these 4K releases when they have the means to, and if those transfers are available. I would assume these must be, I think I've already talked about this before, I think on the website it says that these are like original negative. They must be, because they look so great. These look really fantastic, both these films. And yeah, and this also is they are presented in Dolby Vision, which means nothing to me, but for some people it might. So that's worth noting as well. But that was just really a 4K discussion centered around this release, which I loved so much, and I'm looking forward to diving into this further when I have the time to talk about both films and the extras and stuff. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching. Leave me your thoughts on the 4K format down below, and if you're going to pick up China O'Brien, if you have already, what you think of the transfers and the films themselves. I'd love to hear some thoughts. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one.